It was exactly 1545 when the sun dipped low over Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas. The air on the flight line still carried that dry, late afternoon heat. The kind that settled into your uniform and made even crisp salutes feel heavy. Rows of folding chairs had been set up facing a temporary stage near one of the hangars, each filled with fresh-faced officers straight from training. Their name tags were polished, their boots spotless, and every one of them sat tall, waiting for the promotion ceremony to begin. That's when she walked in. She wore the standard OCP flight uniform, the sleeves rolled neatly, the pants tucked into clean but worn-out boots. There was no visible rank, no name tape, no unit patch, just the uniform and a quiet presence. She moved slowly but deliberately toward the back row, eyes scanning the crowd without meeting anyone's directly. A few heads turned, then a few whispers. Who is she? Is she somebody's wife? Maybe someone's mom. A couple of lieutenants near the back shifted in their seats, uncertain whether to say something or stay quiet. But First Lieutenant Parker didn't hesitate. He stood up from his chair, adjusted his freshly pinned silver bar, and walked right up to her. His posture was firm, chest out, the way instructors had drilled into them during commissioning. He didn't yell, but his voice carried enough edge to cut through the hum of conversations nearby. Ma'am, this area's restricted. This is an official Air Force function. If you need directions to the family tent, it's on the east side. She looked at him, just for a moment. Not annoyed, not afraid, just silent, calm, like she had seen this before. Parker hesitated. Something about her stare made him uncomfortable, but he covered it with a forced smile. Still, she didn't move. It was quiet again. That strange kind of quiet that creeps in when people are watching something they don't understand. The kind of moment that makes you lean in, without even knowing why. And in that moment, everything felt just a little off. Like maybe this wasn't what it seemed. Like maybe the one being watched wasn't the outsider after all. Parker didn't walk away. He stood his ground in front of her, lips tightening, tone sharpening with each second that passed. It was now 1549. To everyone else, the ceremony was just minutes from starting, but for him, this had become personal. His voice cut through the low murmurs. Ma'am, I'm going to say this one more time. This is not open to civilians. You need to clear this area right now. Andrea didn't flinch. She just stood there, calm, still, unmoved. From the chairs behind Parker, a couple of lieutenants leaned forward. One of them whispered something about the uniform. Another noted she hadn't saluted a single officer since she arrived. A third quietly asked why she wasn't wearing a rank patch or name tape. Parker heard all of it, and it only added fuel to whatever was already burning inside him. His jaw tightened. He pointed at her chest, where a name should have been, if you're in uniform. Where's your name? Where's your rank? You're out of regs. Ma'am, this is not a joke. Still, nothing from Andrea. Just a slow blink. A breath. Her hands calmly clasped behind her back. It was the silence that made it worse. He expected her to get defensive, to argue, to say something he could push back on. But she didn't give him that. She gave him nothing. The air around them thickened. The rest of the officers nearby fell quiet. Even the wind seemed to hush. Parker's voice raised again. He was no longer just enforcing protocol. He was trying to assert control. This is your last warning. If you don't leave, I'll call security. Military police will remove you. A flicker of something crossed Andrea's eyes. Not fear, not defiance, just the kind of patience that only came from knowing exactly where she stood, and how little his voice actually mattered. And still, she didn't move. Someone nearby shifted uncomfortably. Another looked at Parker, then back at her, then down at their boots. 1551. And for the first time, Parker began to realize he might have misjudged something. But he didn't stop, because when your pride is louder than your training, You forget to ask the one question that could have changed everything. Who are you? At exactly 1553, footsteps echoed across the concrete behind the crowd. Sharp, unhurried, steady. Colonel William Harris, the commanding officer of Laughlin Air Force Base, stepped into view. He wore his service dress with the ease of someone who'd spent decades earning every ribbon on his chest. His face was calm, but his eyes swept across the scene with precision. They locked instantly on Andrea. He didn't pause, didn't question. He came to a stop just a few feet from her, snapped to attention, and offered a sharp salute. His voice, deep and absolute, cut through the stunned silence. "Ma'am, welcome back. We're honored to have you with us today." The entire area froze. Parker's hand, still half raised, dropped to his side. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The other officers turned one by one, blinking as if their vision had betrayed them. Harris turned to face the group. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Andrea Blake." There was no applause, no movement, just breath held too long, and 1,000 unspoken questions jammed in the back of every throat. Andrea didn't speak. She nodded once, slow and measured, that same unreadable calm on her face, but this time, it didn't feel like silence. It felt like command. Parker stepped back, his boots suddenly too loud on the pavement. His eyes darted between Andrea and Harris. The weight of everything he hadn't asked, hadn't seen, crashed down on him like a slow, sinking wave. No one said a word. No one needed to, because in that moment, every unspoken judgment that had hung in the air minutes before had been swallowed whole by a single truth. She wasn't just someone. She was the highest-ranking officer in the room, and she had been standing there the entire time, waiting for them to notice. Before she ever stood on that concrete with silent eyes and no name tag, Lieutenant Colonel Andrea Blake had already lived the kind of career most airmen only read about in briefing slides. She started in flight school like anyone else, grinding through the early hours and long nights at Columbus Air Force Base. But it wasn't long before she earned her spot in the A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog. The aircraft wasn't sleek or flashy, but it was reliable, tough, and devastatingly precise. In every way, it matched her. Over 3 deployments to Afghanistan, Andrea logged more than one. 400 combat flight hours. She flew close air support for ground troops pinned down in valleys, under fire in terrain most wouldn't dare cross. She didn't just fly missions. She led them. She was eventually given command of the 74th Fighter Squadron, one of the oldest and most respected units in the Air Force. But the story that stayed with everyone came out of her second deployment. It was a late afternoon sortie, a rescue operation gone south. A platoon of U.S. soldiers had been ambushed outside Jalrez, low on ammo and trapped by enemy movement. Andrea responded within minutes. Her A-10 took a direct hit on the right engine on the first pass. Smoke poured from the fuselage. Comms were dead. She had to rely on pre-briefed coordinates, training, and pure instinct. She stayed in the fight for 17 minutes. 17 minutes without communication. One engine gone, taking fire from ground forces. But she held. Her final run gave the ground team just enough space to exfil. Every one of them made it out alive. She landed the aircraft back at Bagram with one engine and half her flight systems offline. She climbed out soaked in sweat, uniform torn. Calm as ever. For that mission, she was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. In 2016, during her third tour, a spinal injury from a rough landing grounded her permanently. But she didn't retire. She transitioned into training, mentored new pilots, helped rewrite parts of the Air Force's tactical doctrine. Now, she serves as a strategic advisor for the Air Force Leadership Development Directorate, quietly shaping the minds of the next generation of commanders. She never talked much about what she did. She never had to. Lieutenant Parker stood frozen, shoulders squared, chin tucked slightly, hands clenched behind his back like a cadet caught cheating on an exam. The color had drained from his face, and his voice, once loud and commanding, was nowhere to be found. Colonel Harris didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His words landed with the force of rank and experience. "Lieutenant, you can apologize to her directly, right now. Or, I'll initiate a formal inquiry with the Inspector General's office by 1700. Your choice." It was 1, 5, 5, 7. Parker swallowed hard. His jaw tightened. When he finally spoke, the words barely made it out. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Andrea stood calmly. No trace of anger in her expression. No satisfaction either. Just measured quiet. "You didn't need to know, Lieutenant. You just needed to care enough to ask." Her voice was even, controlled, almost gentle. It wasn't a lecture. It was a mirror. And everyone watching felt the sting of that reflection. Colonel Harris turned toward the group of young officers. Leadership doesn't begin with orders. It begins with respect. What you witnessed here is the first test of every leader's character, and Parker just failed it. There was no applause, no nods, just silence. The kind that settles in when a room full of people realize something important has just happened. Parker didn't respond. He remained at attention, face locked forward, the weight of the moment settling like lead on his shoulders. But Andrea had already shifted her gaze. She didn't press. She didn't linger. The point had been made, not through punishment, but through grace. In that moment, Parker wasn't humiliated. He was humbled, and the difference mattered. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the tarmac as Andrea Blake stepped forward to begin the pinning ceremony. The rows of young officers were tense, sitting at attention with polished boots and eyes fixed on her every movement. Each step she took echoed softly but carried the weight of her presence, commanding the attention of everyone without a single word. When she reached Parker, the moment felt suspended in time. He stood rigid, eyes straight ahead, not daring to meet her gaze. The tension in the air was palpable, a mixture of expectation and unease. Andrea stopped in front of him, her posture calm, her face unreadable. She reached out and placed the pin on his shoulder. Steady hands, betraying none of the drama that had just unfolded. As she did so, she spoke quietly. A few words meant only for him, imparting more wisdom than any reprimand could. Parker's head bowed slightly in acknowledgement. A mixture of shame and understanding crossing his features. Andrea moved on seamlessly, performing the same careful, deliberate ritual for each officer in line. There were no grand gestures or theatrical displays, only the quiet assertion of authority and respect. Each pin was placed with precision, each step measured. The officers watched her, some swallowing hard, others blinking back surprise, all sensing the gravity of the act before them. The ceremony continued, a rhythm of dignity and recognition that transcended the initial tension. Her calm, unwavering presence transformed the atmosphere. The veneration was quiet but universal, a collective acknowledgement of experience, merit, and character. Each officer, regardless of prior missteps or insecurities, felt the lesson in respect conveyed without humiliation. As the final pin was placed, a ripple of applause began, soft at first, then rising as the entire assembly joined in. It was not a triumphal cheer, but a measured, sincere recognition of the values that defined their service. Andrea Blake stepped back, eyes scanning the group briefly before turning to exit, leaving behind a room still buzzing with awe and contemplation. The ceremony had ended, but its impact lingered, a silent testament to leadership, grounded in respect, calm authority, and the quiet power of integrity. Andrea Blake stepped forward in front of the assembled officers, her presence calm but undeniably commanding. The hum of conversations faded as all eyes fixed on her. She didn't raise her voice to demand attention. She didn't need to. The weight of experience she carried spoke for itself. She began to share a story, not as a lecture, but as a reflection from her own career. During one deployment to Afghanistan, she was piloting an A-10 Thunderbolt II on a close air support mission. The ground team she was supporting had been pinned down and under heavy fire. On her second pass, the aircraft took a hit. One engine was on fire. Systems failed, and her radios went dead. She couldn't call in coordinates, couldn't rely on backup. Every pilot training exercise had prepared her for moments like this. But the reality was harsher. Despite the chaos, she remained steady. She trusted her training. She trusted her instincts. She trusted her team. She navigated through smoke and fire, guided by the briefings, by the markers she had memorized, and by the experience of every mission she had flown before. Her focus never wavered from the soldiers on the ground. They made it out safely, and she managed to land the aircraft with a precision that required everything she had learned in her career. From that mission, she drew a lesson she shared with the young officers that day. Leadership is not about yelling louder or demanding obedience. It is about being calm in the storm, listening, making decisions under pressure, and setting an example through action. Leaders earn trust by showing competence, humility, and consistency, not by asserting rank alone. She concluded with words aimed directly at the next generation of officers. Start with respect for those around you, for your team, and for the mission. End with trust, and you will have built more than a squadron. You will have built loyalty, integrity, and a lasting example of what true leadership looks like. The room was silent. Every young officer felt the weight of her words, the credibility behind them, and the inspiration she imparted without force. It was a lesson in leadership rooted in experience, conveyed with calm authority and profound respect for those who follow. The ceremony had ended, and a calm had settled over the tarmac. Andrea Blake walked slowly away from the center of attention, each step deliberate, her boots making soft impressions on the concrete as the afternoon sun stretched shadows long across the base. The officers she had just honored stood quietly in formation, processing the lessons they had absorbed without words. The tension that had gripped the space earlier was gone, replaced by a reverent stillness. As she moved toward the parking area, a young second lieutenant, still wearing the crisp uniform and the newly pinned insignia, broke from the line and ran to catch up. Her pace was hurried, almost stumbling over her own feet. Eyes wide with admiration and gratitude, she called out softly to Andrea, expressing how much the events of the day had meant, and how Andrea's presence and calm authority made her feel recognized and valued, like she truly belonged in the military family. Andrea paused, turned slightly, and offered a small, knowing smile. She didn't need to say much. Her expression alone conveyed reassurance, affirmation, and a quiet pride. She gestured gently, acknowledging the young officer, letting her know that the feeling of belonging had always been there. It was simply that the world had not always noticed. The young officer nodded, a mixture of relief and inspiration washing over her. And Andrea continued walking. The base was quieter now, the earlier noise replaced by the soft shuffle of boots and the occasional distant hum of a training aircraft. Andrea reached the edge of the parade grounds and stopped. She turned back to watch the formation of officers march across the sunlit tarmac. The light caught the edges of their uniforms, the movement steady and precise. And for a moment, the scene felt like a living testament to discipline, respect, and growth. She stood still, letting the moment linger, absorbing the significance of what had just transpired and the subtle, lasting impact it would have on those who had witnessed it. It was a silent lesson in leadership, in patience, and in the quiet power of earning respect rather than demanding it, the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the base, and Andrea Blake remained there, a figure of calm strength, leaving behind a room, a formation, and a future subtly changed by her presence.